The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Is Monday, the 8th of September, 2025, and we have the best guest ever, Dr. Suzanne Humphries here, live Q&A. So get writing in the chat with your questions. Good morning, Dr. Suze. How are you?
Good morning, Polly. I'm well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. All right, well, let's start off with the first question is, what did you think of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Secretary Kennedy's performance the other day? Well, let's put it another way. Everyone else, the Democrats, screaming at him. I know you watched it, 'cause I watched it with you. So what do you think? Talk to us about that. What's your summary?
Well, I think performance is a really good word to use, not for him, but for the peanut gallery Democrats who were losing their cookies. It was just wonderful to watch, actually. Because I hope that most of the rational world who would watch that would just see them screaming like lunatics, making crazy accusations, and him just sitting there waiting for a minute to speak when they just kept going, yes or no, yes or no. It's a yes or no question. And if he answered with anything yes or no, they had to shut him down. But man, he got a few punches in there that I say if it was a boxing match, I'd be holding his arm up saying who the winner was. Yeah, Pocahontas was wonderful, and she was a wonderful actress, and Bernie was a wonderful actor, and they played their roles very well. And hopefully they are digging their hole deeper and deeper, but so that people are going to finally realize how much pharmaceutical backing the two of them really have. And then there were a bunch of other, I guess, cackling loons there as well. I think anyone watching would have realized what's actually going on.
I mean, do you get the feeling, Mary Holland keeps saying, we're winning, we're winning, we're winning. Do you get the feeling that we actually are gaining something now for the first time ever, or not?
All right. Now, look, you're asking the wrong person because I'm very well known to be a black-pilled person. And look, how long have we been in this? Okay, you've been doing this longer than I have. I've been doing this since 2008. And I have yet to actually see anything getting better. So how do we decide? I guess it's kind of like seeing a patient in the intensive care unit turn around. And there's that moment where, they're near death and you start to see some sparkles, some a normal heartbeat coming or a stronger heartbeat or them starting to breathe on their own a little bit over the ventilator. And you can maybe see that. Well, I think we're at that phase where maybe if you want to be really optimistic and completely not black-pilled, that maybe something could potentially turn. But this isn't a problem of Robert Kennedy. This is a problem of who's really running the world, as far as I'm concerned. So while they may throw us little crumbs and allow us little victories here and there, we're still all here at the bottom, not knowing who exactly is up there at the top pulling the strings and even telling Cassidy what to do, because Cassidy isn't running things either. So no, I can't get happy over this. I can say, okay, it was, at least it was a move. There are lots of moves that are seemingly in the right direction right now. Does that make me optimistic? No, but you're going to have to ask me in another probably 4 to 8 years when we see where things have really gone. And it's not because people that we love and voted into power aren't doing their job. It's not just as simple as that. It's much more complicated than that.
I would say the good thing about everything that's been going on since he's got in is that a lot of people are talking about vaccines and autism. Lots of people are discussing it. There'll be lots of fights, but hopefully we're getting to those ears of those young mums that just think, hang on, what? There is a connection? Maybe. So it's more talked about. All right, we've got some questions coming. Let's do a question, and then we're gonna put Rogan's situation right. But I like the one that just came in from Nancy. I'm going to have to scroll down. Can anyone explain the polio vaccine to Trump? It's terrible that Trump uses this as an example of effective and important vaccines. But it's not just Trump, is it? That's all we ever get shouted at. They used to call me Polio Polly, remember, when we were on the bus.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second. Put that right if you were standing in front of Trump in a couple of minutes.
Oh, well, first thing I would say is, Mr. Trump, you are a very intelligent man. You are very well read. I find it hard to believe that you don't really understand what's going on here regarding polio. But if you really need me to explain it to you like a third grader, I will, because I've been doing that now for so many years. Because when I was waking up to the problem of flu vaccines in my own kidney patients, which were actually causing them to have inflammatory kidney disease and kidney failure, the only question tossed at me by my colleagues was, what about polio? So I had to go down that polio track. And I'll tell you, just like people are waking up now because of COVID, I woke up then because of the people that were asking me about polio. And when I read through that polio history, and I read what the doctors of the 1950s and 1960s were saying, and when I read what the statistician Paul Meyer was saying about the doctors who were put in charge to be on the advisory board for the Salk vaccine, who were in disagreement with what was going on, everything changed for me. That was really a crowning moment for me, where I, just my worldview almost fell apart, because the whole polio history that we've been told over and over, that we hear Elon Musk saying, that we hear Trump saying, is absolutely categorically false. And that the fact of the matter is that polio would have decreased significantly even if there was no vaccine at all ever created, because the definition changes that came after the 1954 field trials, and the 1955 was the first year the polio vaccine was administered, required a completely different diagnostic criteria. And even Dr. Bernard Greenberg, who was a pro-vaccine scientist who just really wanted the truth, he was a statistician, a professor, he was saying exactly what I'm saying. And I have done several videos on this topic. I think they're called The Peanut Gallery and The Flying Monkeys, and it's on my Odyssey channel. And look, I'm not going to break this down for you in 5 minutes. It took me years to write the 65 to 70 pages that I put in the polio chapter in Dissolving Illusions. And it takes me months to put videos together to collect all the data and all the facts. But bottom line is that there was a huge amount of goalpost shifting and manipulation of data and media hype in order to maintain the lie over the polio vaccine being the reason why the polio supposedly went away. When all we see before 2012, when the internet was still open and free, we had diagrams that we put into Dissolving Illusions showing the rates of acute flaccid paralysis in the third world, where DDT is still used and where polio vaccinations are used in very high numbers in pulse fashion, and some children getting up to 30 oral polio vaccines in their lifetime, okay? And all we see is that paralysis rates are going up. They're not going down. So while they don't call that polio, it would have been called polio in 1954. So hopefully I've given you a little insight into that.
That's good. Okay, let's remind people about Dissolving Illusions. You can get that on Amazon. I know some of you don't want to do the Amazon thing, but Suzanne, where else can they get it?
Oh, just go to dissolvingillusions.com. We've got several other printers now that if you don't want to do Amazon, you can order through there. So yeah, just look at Dissolving Illusions. Has everything you need. It's got free material. It's got the graphic images that I'm talking about, the one that I just brought up now. It's got how to contact Roman and myself, what our other books are, and our social media pages.
Maybe just everybody should send a copy of Dissolving Illusions to the White House for Trump to actually read, and then maybe he won't be so not understanding of it all. Now, what about your other book? I just want to say this because I loved Rising from the Dead. That was my fave of all. Is that still out?
It's still out. That's how we met, actually, because you read it and you went live with it, and that was really great. Yeah, it doesn't sell very well. It doesn't sell like Dissolving Illusions, but I think it's a really exciting and fun read. It's a kind of book you can read in 2 days, whereas Dissolving Illusions, you'd go mad if you tried to read that in 2 days. So Rising from the Dead is my autobiography, which chronicles my time from high school through university, when I switched majors from nursing to physics, and then my 2 years working in a laboratory, and then my realizing how dim-witted medical students were. So I felt that if they could, they rotated through my lab, actually, and I was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So I applied to medical school. I got in. It kind of chronicles my time through medical school, residency, my early career, and why I left conventional medicine. And it also is about my spiritual awakening is in there as well.
Yeah, it's a really, really good book. All right, okay, so let's do some more questions, and then we're going to do the Matt Crovell. What happened after the Joe Rogan interview? How bad was the censorship? How bad was the attack? That interview was great. And Matt Crovell, you are great as well. Okay, what happened? Was it good for
Hi,
you?
Macroval. Thank you for the compliment. There wasn't, I don't believe there was, well, okay, was there censorship? Well, Joe Rogan wasn't taken off of YouTube. Even, I've been kicked off of YouTube for years now, but Joe's not. And so I guess censorship wasn't that bad. He sent me a message, shortly after the podcast saying that the pushback was surprisingly impotent. And I said, well, maybe it was to you, but it wasn't to me. So I actually spent 2 months making videos just to counter what the PhD trolls, hired hands from the pharmaceutical industry, were saying. There was literally nothing that I said during that podcast that they didn't attack, including that human milk is the best form of feeding for human infants. They even cast doubt onto that. It was their job. They did it. They did it. And I guess it always boils down to who reads what. And so I really wanted to put my videos up on the Dissolving Illusions page, but I don't know why that's not happened yet. I think they should go up there, but they're now on Odyssey if you want to see all the what the trolls said to doubt my comments and then what I responded to. There was one mistake I made, which was actually a really big mistake, and I have a lot of regret about it. But see, that's the difference between me and these other people that we deal with every day, is that we admit our mistakes. And I actually said why I made the mistake, and I said that the MMR had mercury in it. Of course, the MMR doesn't have mercury in it. There's no other place where I've ever stated that. I meant to say the DPT, and I said MMR. And in the heat of the moment, when so many thoughts were going through my head, and that was a very high pressure situation for me. I know it was just a one-on-one in a room, but you kind of know beforehand, what potential outcomes there are when you have that many millions of people listening to you. And I've had stage fright my entire life. This entire 12 years of getting used to being in the public eye is completely against who I am. I'd much rather just stay in an isolated town in a place where nobody knows me and never do anything publicly. But sometimes we're called to do that. And so there I was on the show. And afterwards, there was huge amounts of attack from the usual suspects, who I'm not even going to name because I don't want to make them any more famous. But what was really nice is that people in our camp, like, Kevin McKernan wrote to me and said, oh, it's those guys. Oh, let me show you how many mistakes they've made, and let me show you how stupid they are, and let me show you some of the videos that have been made against them. So that was kind of comforting to see that, they've been on the attack to everybody, and that the attacks have been going both ways. So, for me, it wasn't so much as attacking them, although I do ridicule them from time to time. It was more about setting the record straight for people like you who have heard me speak for this amount of years and then think, oh, is everything she said just, one big lie because she made a mistake? And so I really feel like it was my duty to my own audience, not to the trolls, but to my own audience, to answer to as much as I could of the PhD trolls. That said, I'm not going to spend my life doing it. I'll plant my flag in the sand, and then I walk away, and I'm done now. It was exhausting to do those videos. I basically took time off from work to do it. I took a lot of time off to do that entire, Rogan sequence and videos afterwards, but it was fun. It was a really good experience. Joe Rogan was a really great host. He's extremely knowledgeable, and now people are trying to argue with him about vaccines, and they might as well get into the into a fighting ring with them, because they're not going to win in either place.
Well, let's play that clip, shall we? I think this is perfect cue. So this happened, last week, a couple of days ago. The Rogan clip. Well, anyway, we'll play it. And
I'm not sure when that was. It was because it was just a clip that I saw. I don't know how long ago the whole.
Okay, doesn't matter. Let's put it out, because you're going to enjoy this, people.
Let's get to the bottom of
like
that.
anorexia.
What's causing all that? How come 1 in every 12 kids who's a boy in California has autism now? Because that's what's going on. That's what's going on in California, which has one of the strictest fucking vaccine policies. 1 in 12. Did I say vaccines cause autism? Maybe I will have
RFK is getting to that, yeah.
Yeah.
And now Florida doesn't demand vaccines
Yeah,
for kids.
that's dangerous to me.
Yeah.
I knew you'd jump on that train.
Of course, it's dangerous, Brian. What are you
It is.
talking about?
Tetanus,
All vaccines.
tetanus.
So
Tetanus,
should
tetanus,
we
No,
still-
no,
should
no,
we just go down the road we're
You
on?
need to bail on the tetanus thing because
What do you
Suzanne Humphries,
Educate his ass.
Suzanne Humphries explained tetanus.
She's not a
She's like,
vaccinologist. I know that woman. What are you talking about? So you're saying we
she's a
shouldn't have
medical
vaccines?
doctor that absolutely understands tetanus. She said tetanus, all you have to do is keep the wound open and clean it.
Oh, that's
You-
such shit.
It's not.
God,
It's
what-
not. Do you know how many people die of tetanus
Hold-
every? What about polio?
Okay, so let me ask you a question, Mr. Joe Rogan, Mr. Scientist. Are you saying that we shouldn't have...
do that. Don't call me Mr. Scientist. I'll start mocking you, and it's so much easier to mock you.
So are we not... So you don't believe in vaccines? You don't think we should have vaccines?
It's not that I don't believe in vaccines.
What are you saying?
It's I
shouldn't
don't
have
think you
74.
should give a kid a Hep B vaccine when they're a baby.
Different subject.
I don't, no, MMA vaccine is absolutely connected to a host of serious, debilitating problems that kids have gotten from them. There's a lot of problems because they don't test vaccines in a double-blind, placebo-controlled setting.
Hold it.
They test them against other vaccines. You know that, right?
Yes, I do. Excuse me. Let me just say something. Yes, you're right. You can make the argument for Hep B. Here's why. Because the chances of a child coming in contact with the kind of activity that causes Hep B is different. So now
Sexually
you say,
transmitted disease and
right.
needles.
So now you say this. You say this. That chance is zero. The chance for vaccine injury with the Hep B is not zero, is non-zero. Okay, so I understand that math. Okay, what I'm trying to say to you is that there are certain diseases. Pick up a history book: smallpox, diphtheria, mumps.
Have you ever looked at
tetanus,
how-
polio, paralytic diseases?
Have you ever polio? Please
Yes.
stop.
No,
You
I
don't-
won't. I won't. I know you think it's just. I've heard Suzanne Humphries.
This is a long conversation that we're not going to have on this podcast
Right.
because I'm going to get angry because I've researched this for years.
Right.
Let's just.
But you're not a scientist.
I don't have to be a scientist
do.
to know that.
Yes, you do.
No, Brian, shut the f- up. I don't have to be a scientist to read research to understand that they were spraying DDT all over the country when everybody was getting polio. Do you know that?
Yes,
you know
I do.
the first
Yes, I
instances
do.
of polio, they happened in rural communities where they were all farmland and agriculture, and then cows were getting them, and horses were getting them, and dogs were getting them.
Let me make a statement.
They were calling it paralytic polio.
Do you agree with the following statement? It's not just.
I'm not going to do this with you,
but
Brian.
it's not just about.
I brought up
It's not
vaccines,
just
so that'd
about.
be a
Hold
fun
on,
debate.
hold on, Joe.
No,
it's
Brian,
not
I don't want to do this with
but
you.
it's not
I don't wanna
just
do this.
about.
We're in
is
the
it-
middle of a fight companion.
All right.
It's annoying.
All right, but it's like, yeah. Being anti-vax.
but
being
be-
anti-vax
no,
is
What's
irresponsible.
anti-vax,
It's not
Brian?
anti-vax. Questioning why there's so many, though.
My kids are all vaccinated, and they're vaccinated, but they went on
they
a
are.
delayed schedule. They delayed
So did
schedule.
mine. So did
you're
mine.
not.
So did
You're
mine.
not?
Yeah, you're not. No.
Yeah, good for you. I don't think you need to.
No, they're healthy.
Yeah.
Between the two of them, they have 12 touchdowns this week. 2 home runs.
I think the problem is that the pharmaceutical drug companies have an exemption because of what they did in the 1980s with Reagan, where they allowed them to never worry about being sued. And that's when they ramped up the schedule. And that's also the correlation.
All right, well, I think that's enough of that. But I want to actually thank Lou for cutting all the F-bombs out of that. He did a good job, didn't he? There was a lot in there.
Yeah, they were all very well used, though, I think.
Absolutely. So do you know whoever that Brian is? He says he knows you. Do you know him?
Oh, yes. Well, I know him now. So Brian is a comedian who has lived all over the world and had lots of worldly experiences because his father is an international banker and was a very important member of the World Economic Forum. Oh, there's a big shocker, isn't there? Okay, so I took a few notes while Brian was pooping out his mouth. And the word vaccinologist, like, okay. So the term vaccinologist is a relatively new term, and the idea of vaccinology as if it's a scientific branch all of its own is rather new. But that kind of discounts all the people that were immunologists, pediatricians, clinicians watching what's going on. So I think it's funny that we have to be vaccinologists, but that Brian Callen can just espouse whatever he thinks is right and tell everybody else that they don't know what they're talking about. I like also that his shirt said archetype. So look up what archetype actually means. I think that's pretty funny. And so everything's just so totally black and white to these people. I find that really interesting. And another thing I noticed is that Rogan did the same thing I did. Remember, he said MMA instead of MMR. Well, he's a mixed martial artist. So it's really easy to mistake 3-letter abbreviations when we're having these conversations, which is exactly what I did when I said MMR and I wanted to say DPT. So anyway, yep, smallpox and polio came right up there, didn't it? And he knows absolutely nothing about smallpox. And these people, and I think I'm sorry to say, like Trump, don't want to know because, Susie, what's her name? Susie, is that her name? Susie Wiles? Is basically pulling the strings on Trump. I don't think he gets to decide what to say and what to do. I wish that he did, because years ago he was talking about, members of his staff having children, who became autistic and had, lots of shots at one time in their childhood. And now here we have Rogan and Cullen and the other guy that's sitting there, the reasonable guy, talking about how they had their delayed schedule, or they only gave them one vaccine at a time. Well, that's really nice for the privileged, people who are going to private pediatricians. It's very different, Polly, isn't it, to the lady that you talked to? Was it up in Michigan recently, who just brought her child in for a well baby visit and got fluoride put on her 2 teeth, and then got caught up on her vaccination schedule all at once. And then the child's having epilepsy on the drive on the way home. And, this is, or, worse than that is that these babies can die. And you did an interview of a baby that died under these conditions. Well, this doesn't happen to the Cullens and the Rogans of the world, because they have pediatricians who are treating them very nicely and who are knowledgeable. And presumably it would have been someone like Dr. Sears in California who was dealing with those people. That's great. That would be really nice. If you're going to vaccinate, it is your choice still to this day in most places, at least for an infant. They had a good outcome, and they had the privilege of probably knowing about, healthy habits while pregnant, and, a normal birth without cord clamping and with breastfeeding. And this kind of stuff sets people up to tolerate the insult, the unnecessary insult of vaccination later, better than infants who are born to unaware mothers who don't understand how to take care of their own health, even when they're not pregnant, and who go into the medical system to give birth. That sets these people up for the worst outcomes, and the instability in the immune system, the developing neurological system as well in an infant, that when those cluster bombs get tossed into early on, that's when you really see the problems. But I also will say that these people who delayed vaccinating their children, they think everything's okay because their kids are okay now. But, one of the big things, I just did a live stream this weekend with Judith Vary Baker and Nick Potosky, and all we talked about was adventitious agents in the vaccines. What are adventitious agents? Well, anyone that knows how vaccines are made from start to finish will understand that a lot of animal cells are required, that animal blood is required, plasma, to be called bovine serum albumin, things like fetal calf serum are required to cultivate the cells that you're growing the microbes in. And then there's the harvesting. So all kinds of contamination is possible. Contamination with adventitious agents, which are opportunistic infections that can live benignly in the natural host, but then when they get into humans can cause all kinds of problems. And the archetype of that is simian virus 40, SV40, which was present in the polio vaccine, and is also embedded in the plasmid DNA that was used to, the promoter region was anyway, in a genetic way, much more advanced way than they had in the old days, into the promoter region of the plasmid that made the COVID vaccine for Pfizer. And that was not disclosed to the EMA. And it was, most people were completely unaware that they got a form of simian virus 40 genetic code, which wasn't supposed to even go into them. It was only supposed to stay behind with the plasmid, and only the messenger RNA neatly packed in the little lipid nanoparticles that were only supposed to stay in your muscle during the injection, as all the propaganda told us, was completely false. So even these kids, like Rogan's kids, good for him for delaying. But they would have been injected with avian leukosis viruses. If they got the rotavirus vaccine, they could have got porcine circovirus 2, which is basically like pig AIDS virus, which is thought to be not a problem at all in humans when it was discovered in the vaccine. And it was left in there. It hasn't been removed. Go ask Grok now. Find out if there's still porcine circovirus in the Rototech and the there's another rotavirus vaccine. So this kind of thing happens, and it's not picked up by the drug companies that are making the vaccine. It's not picked up by the oversight committees. It's picked up by the Kevin McKernans of the world and other independent scientists who just happen to say, oh, let's have a look at this. And then they find these adventitious agents, or they're found later because people are having disease problems. Yeah, there he is. Brilliant guy. So, if you want to know more about adventitious agents, please go to Nick Petoskey's X channel, Petosky, where he's got a library just full of information on this subject. And so, it's so much more complicated than just, have this little injection so that you don't get this disease. It's an industry that is extremely dangerous and toxic, and in my opinion, should be avoided.
Yeah, and spacing out doesn't work because Billy only had one shot, the MMR, and he's completely damaged from it. Also, well, what really gets on my nerves when that Brian guy is saying, you have to be a scientist to be able to do your research. It was so patronizing, and that's what we get the whole time. Polly, you've not got a medical degree. How dare you speak out? It was ridiculous.
But Bill Gates is allowed to be at a dinner party with the president to define how our immune system should be treated moving into the future. So I guess it depends on which side you're on. It's also this whole thing about being kind and being nice. You're supposed to only be kind and be nice to the people that agree with you. And it's the same thing. You're not a scientist. You're not considered a scientist unless you're saying the things that the dominant forces of the world right now agree with.
And that interview you were talking about, I started listening to it, but with autism around me, it was a bit difficult. But people, you're going to want to listen to it. I clicked on it on Suzanne's X. It's Dr. Suzanne Humphries on X, isn't it?
Yeah, I have a link there, but Nick has still a link. And if you don't know who Judith Vary Baker is, she was Lee Harvey Oswald's lover. They were both married, unhappily married, and they were basically like 22 years old, and they were already, Lee Harvey Oswald was a double agent, and Judith was multilingual and had her own lab set up for her, and was recruited by the CIA at around the age of 15. She didn't know what she was being recruited to do, but she was basically in the middle of the plot to kill Castro, but also what that ended up being was the plot to kill Kennedy, but she was unaware of that. She thought she was trying to protect Kennedy. Turns out everyone around her was killed. Lee Harvey Oswald was killed. Jack Ruby was killed. Oxner eventually died. David Ferrie was killed. Everyone in her midst was killed, and she spent her life pretty much hiding and on the run. So she was a very high IQ, brilliant scientist, and she still is. And she's written several books. And so to have someone like that talking about what happened back then with this SV40 virus and how they were weaponizing the SV40 virus using a particle accelerator with the idea that if they could make it super, super dangerous and cause cancer in a matter of a week, which they were able to do actually in the laboratory mice, that they could somehow get it into Castro and kill him with cancer and nobody would ever know. Well, that plot failed. But anyway, that the whole discussion centered around adventitious agents in vaccines, but this was kind of a side twist to the whole thing.
Yeah, go to Dr. Suzanne's Twitter or X and click on that and listen to it. You're going to love it. Okay, let's get another question from a viewer. We're going to go to Lulu. What are your thoughts on cancer treatments and vitamin C? Would this be helpful with soft tissue sarcoma? Well, first of all, Dr. Suzanne's not really allowed to give out medical advice, I don't think. Maybe she is, I don't know. But I know you know a lot about cancer and vitamin C.
Well, I happen to work in a clinic that does mostly vitamin C for people with cancer. I've never seen vitamin C cure a case of cancer. It does not cure cancer. However, when they look at the studies, there was a guy up in New Zealand, in Northland, who looked at, I don't know, it was 500 or 1,000 of his own patients, some who had got vitamin C and some who hadn't. They all had cancer. And what he found the most impact was on quality of life. And there was a slight increase in, or I should say, advantage in longevity. I think you need to do more than vitamin C if you're dealing with a sarcoma. But you know what? You're going to get different opinions from lots of different people. You're going to have some people tell you to leave the tumor in because if you take it out, you're going to cause metastatic disease, which I just roll my eyes and I say, okay, well, how does that explain the stage 4 cancers that present without ever knowing anything? And I've seen many a person want to leave their tumor in and eventually, they end up dying. So I'm a fan of surgery. I think surgery is a really good idea when you have a tumor. I think it should be done really carefully. And then I think all those other things that suppress or kill off, because we have mechanisms to kill cancer in our body. We're making cancer all the time. We have basically genetic mechanisms that scan the DNA and then kill off cells that are unhealthy. So it's a matter of getting that part of your immunity up and running properly if you want to survive long term.
Yeah, so basically cutting out sugar. Sugar's bad, I read, sure, doesn't it? Feed the cancer cells or no?
Well, I think it also impairs immunity. So if you want to look at it that way, it is kind of this battle between your immune system and the cancer cells, and it puts the cancer at an advantage and it puts the immune system at a disadvantage.
All right, let's go to another question. This is Pete. If I was a pregnant mother, well, Pete, you're not going to be a pregnant mother, I would say. I don't know.
Well, you never know.
You never know these days. What advice would you give regarding vaccination for me and my future baby? And the other question I got earlier is, in your book, you talk about birth and cutting the cord. So let's talk a bit about pregnancy and birth.
Right. Okay, well, when I first woke up to the problem of vaccines in my adult kidney patients, I had no clue about what was going on with infants at all, because I was an adult doctor. Over time, I've spent a lot of time in the pediatric literature and observing vaccinated and unvaccinated people, talking to mothers, talking to midwives. I've spent a lot of time in this space, probably more time than I spent in the kidney space, to be quite honest with you. And I've done a full series that took me 5 hours to present. And it's called Infant Immunity Series, that I actually put some clips of it up in my X page today. My Odyssey channel link is on my X page, and that full series can be watched there. But to summarize, very, very simply summarize, is that, when I first started researching this, I just thought, well, humans are born flawed and we have to come up with things because we live in this fallen world and now we're tasked at, making things better. Well, sorry, that's not correct, because our genetics and the birth process and the development process from the egg and the sperm and the ball of cells that expands into 3 layers and then folds over itself and communicates with each other to create organs, and then a heartbeat and a digestive system and a nervous system, and orchestrates that with the mother and the placenta and her nervous system, and cytokines and inflammatory and anti-inflammatory changes throughout the pregnancy. Like, a lot of women's autoimmune diseases get better because pregnancy dampens down the mother's immune system, because she's basically having a foreign body in her. And then right before birth, we have this increase in inflammation, catecholamines and stress hormones. But that's good. We want that right before the birth. That's what stimulates labor. All those catecholamines, which are like 40 times higher than a man having a heart attack, are present in that baby during birth. That's good. We want it there. We want those inflammatory things. We want those cytokines there. We want those stress signals there, because it dries out the lungs of the baby when it's born. It gets the heartbeat going. It gets the lungs going. It helps to shut down the pathway with the valves, the heart pathways that were pregnant in the fetus in utero, that changes as soon as that baby takes its first breath. So there's this entire divinely orchestrated system in place. And then everything after that birth, including 8 million stem cells that come out of the placenta if you don't clamp it, the mother's breast milk, the colostrum, and the stem cells that come out of that, as well as the other immune chemicals that come through her, are that baby's birthright. And when that's done properly, everything in that baby is calmed down so that it doesn't have a heart attack, because that's a lot of stress that infant has to deal with. And everything in those first few months of life is geared towards holding that fully competent immune system in the baby. Now, notice I said fully competent immune system in the baby, holding that down. It's like having a wild stallion, what's a horse called when it's a baby, a colt, a wild colt stallion. It has to be tamed, but you can't just let it go. You never catch it again. Well, the immune system's the same way. So the immune system's being held in place by what are called immune clamps. If I remember, it's like Th17 cells, or I go through all the details of it in my, and I give you the references as well, the medical references where they did animal research as well as human research. That baby's immune system is designed to be quiescent. Okay. It is. So the first vaccine you throw in there completely defies that design, which is set in place to make sure that over the entire lifespan of that human being, they have a competent immune system that can develop properly, that their gut will develop properly with the education of the mother's milk, that it will be introduced to microbes through the mother's milk, that it will be introduced to microbes in the world. And the most important task in that infant and its immune system is to learn what not to react to. It's not what to learn to react to. What not to react to is the most important thing, because if we reacted to every microbe that's around us, we would be dead. Our immune systems would just kill us because of autoimmunity, because those microbes, every microbe you can think of pretty much, has identical genetic sequences and protein sequences to our own genetics and our own proteins. And if we start reacting to every microbe that's not invasive, now that's important, that's not invasive, that's just on our skin or in our intestines, then we will start to attack ourselves as well. And there's a Dr. Daria Kandu, D-A-R-J-A is her first name, Kandu, K-A-N-D-U-C, who has written many, many articles on the subject of what I'm talking about right now, which is the autoimmune potential when introduced. And she talks about vaccines pretty unapologetically. And so that's what happens when you drop these vaccines on day one. When that immune system is supposed to be quiescent, you are starting the ball rolling for disaster. And then at your 2 months, more disaster, 4 months, more disaster. You are basically saying, have all this aluminum, have all this aluminum and have all these micro bits and react. You are causing a bonfire that literally that child could be paying the price for the rest of its life, or it could be killed by it. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that asthma and allergies are at higher levels in babies who are vaccinated. And so we live in this world where parents have this idea that if you make the right choice, you'll have zero risk. Well, there's no zero risk. Everything is about understanding the potential benefits and the potential risks of what you're doing. And in my opinion, throwing inflammatory vaccines into a baby's immune system, when that immune system is designed to be very slowly expanding and learning as the clamps are being set off, but more importantly, the brain, they talk about plasticity of the brain when we're first born. Well, that plasticity, what that means is that there are actually immune cells like glial cells in there, G-L-I-A-L, that are very important. And what that helps with the trimming back of the brain, because the brain's a little bit like a bonsai tree, and that it will grow, but then it has to get trimmed back. And it's still to this day, very mysterious. But if you look at a chart of what's happening neurologically inside a baby's brain every day, there are sequences of growth and of stimulation and upregulation of certain genes regarding the brain and of certain neurons in the brain that are set to go in a particular order. It's like dominoes. And you don't want to interrupt that, because that's what creates a really highly intelligent system there. If you start throwing viruses and monkey wrenches and immune stimulants in there, all bets are off as to having normal development occur.
Of course, I muted then. Sorry about that. Josh is just saying that the doctor clamped and cut the cord, but only after the cord had stopped pulsing. Is that long enough?
That is the minimum amount when it stops pulsing. So if the doctor did that, then presumably that baby would have got the 8 million stem cells out of the placenta and into its own body. It's basically a third of that baby's blood is left behind in the placenta, and the vultures of industry are all over that as well. And I believe that's part of why, even though the OBGYN and the ACOG all say that it's not necessary and you shouldn't do cord clamping, it's still done because industry still controls medical school and still controls the obstetricians. There's no reason it should be done. It's about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes until that cord stops pulsing. But what you see, I remember doing my OB rotation, and I remember that there was just like this mad rush to get the clamps on. It was like, if you don't do it now, all the blood's going to go back into the mother. Like, what's the big rush there? Oh, we've got to put it on the metal table and get the APGAR scores. The medicalization of birth is one of the worst things that's happened to humanity.
Yeah, let's talk about that girl that I sat next to in the hairdressing salon. Yes, in case anyone hasn't noticed. Anyway, She was beautiful. She can't have been more than 25 years old. And she had a good bump on her. And I was telling Dr. Suzanne that I asked her, when's your baby due? And she said, it's due, I'm going to have it. I'm scheduled to have it. That's the word she used, on this date. And I said, why are you scheduled? How do you know when you're going to go into labor? Oh, I have to be induced because I'm high risk. Why are you high risk? You look perfectly healthy and beautiful. Oh, I have blood clotting problems. I have to have my stomach stuff put in my tummy every day. And just the medical intervention already for that baby is ridiculous. That is the average human being that we're having today. Pregnant lady.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so much wrong with this entire story. So we can only imagine where the blood clots came from, right? I mean, clearly this girl, she sounds so naive that she probably would have had numerous COVID jabs and boosters. She's probably fully vaccinated. She's probably had Gardasil. And who knows, she was probably born by C-section. Her mom probably says, it's no problem. Look how healthy you are. And so here she is trusting the medical system because now she's captured, because she has now no confidence in herself. She has no knowledge whatsoever, and she will be destroyed because of that lack of knowledge. So she's going to have an induced labor. Now, let me just tell you something about the difference between C-sections if you have an induction of labor or versus if you have a C-section without any labor whatsoever. So if you just have your planned C-section and there's no labor at all, then that baby is put in the worst position because it's never got any of those catecholamines, any of that advantageous stress, as I talked about earlier. But if you at least have some labor before a C-section, then that baby's in a much better position, especially if it can be, its microbiome can be established normally and the cord can be left alone, which usually that happens when the father's in the operating room saying, no, leave that alone for now, just deal with everything else. But I don't know what you meant. If she's going to be induced, then that would presumably mean that she was going to have her membrane stripped, which is a terrible procedure to do. It's not, nowhere in nature is that ever done. And it supposedly stimulates labor, although I've just seen so many cases where it doesn't, and people end up with infections and problems with that. And so, she'll be dependent upon the system. She'll probably be told that she's not making enough milk and that it's perfectly fine to give formula, which is basically a toxic compound of, trying to mimic milk with different nutrients. But if you just read the ingredients in formula, you'll know right away it's still absolutely not the same thing. It doesn't have stem cells. It doesn't have Hamlet. It doesn't have, the immune globulins and the mother's microbiome going out through the breast milk either. So it's just really sad. And so now this girl's going to be on anticoagulants probably for life, unless she wakes up and realizes that she's curable, because she probably is.
Well, look, that leads us on to Annie's question. Have you heard about nanotech in the jabs? Nanotech showing up in the blood of people?
Oh boy, you're going to get me in a lot of trouble with this one. Okay, let me just point you to a Solari video that I did with Catherine Austin Fitz about 2 months ago, and it's been made public, and I have it pinned to my X page. And if you want to know what I think about nano in the jabs, you can look there. I don't generally talk about nano in the jabs because you can't see nano under a microscope. Remember, micro is micro. So you can only see nano if you have an electron microscope or if there's a clump of particles. And I think that this is an area that hasn't been fully and thoroughly examined. I'll just say that. I think there's enough wrong with the jabs. But here's the real question. And this is the question that Catherine Austin Fitz poses. And I keep saying to Catherine, stop talking about the mysterious ingredients. We don't know what's in it. And she goes, yeah, that's why they're mysterious ingredients. And so she left the title that. But she keeps saying, okay, Suzanne, we have this vaccine that's not a vaccine, that has no efficacy, that is unsafe. It doesn't stop transmission, and it doesn't stop people from getting COVID, yet they can't stop pumping it into humanity. Why else would they be wanting to do that? And so that's where I go, well, yeah, there's got to be some other kind of nefarious goal here. Is nano part of it? There were people that had cell phones and said they could track codes. I asked them to show me what the applications were, and I put them on my phone, and I sat with patients and I said, do you mind if I scan you? And I'm sorry to say that I came up empty with that. I wasn't able to track anybody with my cell phone. Now, does that mean nobody else was? No, it doesn't mean that, because the vaccines were non-uniform, and there were some people that got more jabs than others. And so I'm not ruling that out as a possibility, but I can't say with certainty that they were injecting, traceable nanotech. But again, I don't put it past them.
Okay, let's go to Bill, changing the subject. Dr. Humphries, is there a greater risk from measles and mumps if girls get it in adolescence? Does it impact fertility? Assume they are totally vax-free at this point. What are your thoughts on value, if any, of the vaccination? Oh, no. Well, I can answer that. Absolutely not. You do not take the MMR. Or MMR, no. Bill, what are you thinking? We're not afraid of measles, are we?
Well, Bill's probably new to the class. Well, I'll tell you that I didn't ever see measles in my life until 2019, because the measles vaccine did stop the transmission of measles in the world where it was used, because it's basically injecting a case of measles into the body, okay, in the wrong way. So there's all kinds of problems with that. But the result is that we didn't see measles circulating like people did prior to my childhood. So during 2019, I cared for people anywhere between 2 years and 19 years old who developed measles. They're all alive. Their parents now admittedly brought them for intravenous vitamin C, which a lot of them needed. Some of them didn't. They wanted to do it just in case. So it's not ideal. The ideal time to have measles, I think, is between like 4 and 9 years old. That's probably the time when, just like we have the immune system developing sequentially, diseases, there's ideal times for these different infectious agents to come in. So measles, for one, I believe, now I don't know that measles has always been around since the beginning of time. I think it probably hasn't, but it's one of the diseases that there actually are some advantages to, especially if you get it during the 4 to 9 year. But even people who have had it afterwards, like I've talked to adults who had measles. I talked to somebody down in the south of New Zealand after I gave a talk there. He was an adult man, and he said that he had measles after his child had it when he was in his 30s. And he said it was no picnic, but afterwards he felt so much younger. His pain in his knees went away. And so measles has an advantage in terms of, and a lot of viral infections do, into kind of class switching the immune response over into a Th1 slant, which is your cell-mediated immunity. It's also a massive molting. Think of it that way, is that the cell turnover that happens in measles is astronomical. So you're getting rid of a lot of cells that, who knows what was in them, toxic metals, chemicals. You're getting rid of a lot of cells. They're being degraded by your body and excreted. And that's why we need a lot of vitamin A also, not just for the eye, but because the cell turnover is so massive. So there are advantages to having measles. It's ideal to have it during the childhood years, and it's ideal to know what you're dealing with and know how to treat it, kind of like the parents in the 1950s, 40s, 30s knew how to treat it. If you talk to your great grandmother, she'll probably say, I don't know why we needed a measles vaccine, because we dealt with it perfectly fine. Now, some people just stuck children in a dark room and said that was good enough. Well, that's not good enough. The reason they put them in a dark room is because they had photophobia, because the light hurt their eyes. What you want to do is you want to treat that. And so that's a lot of the problems we have with the historical accounts of measles being so dangerous. It was mostly dangerous because people didn't know how to deal with it, or because doctors were trained wrong, or they were using sedatives or purgatives, or, not feeding children properly, or, like you say, putting them in the dark when they should be putting them out in the sunshine. So we have to look at that as well.
Yeah, and as we saw with those 2 girls, do not take your child to a hospital if you have measles, because they may not come out like those 2 girls did. But I interviewed loads of teenagers with measles that had measles, and they were fine. They felt great afterwards. So, Bill, I hope that answers your question. Right, this is a question from Dilana. I hope I said that right. Dr. Suzanne, how concerned are you about tainted blood supply? Are the unvaccinated people at risk? It's a great question.
100%. Yeah. Look, I don't know what kind of blood products you're talking about, but if you're probably referring to if somebody bleeds and needs a blood transfusion. You know, young people can tolerate high degrees of anemia. It's really only people who have cardiovascular issues that can't tolerate anemia if it happens. So, there are all different kind of possibilities of why people might need blood transfusions. So you can have your acute trauma situations where people, they really are bleeding out and they need some sort of, colloidal blood support. There is artificial blood. I don't know why that's never taken off. They weren't allowing people to do family donations of blood, for blood products. And at least where I'm living, it's roulette. If you're going to have a blood transfusion, you're likely going to have spiked blood. Now, that's not exactly the same as having blood that's, as taking the vaccine directly, but you're likely to have contaminants. The DNA plasmid contaminants could still be in there, depending on how recently your donor was jabbed. And it's not just COVID jabs; it's all jabs. So yeah, I think it's the way I look at transfusions. Look, my senior partner was dying of leukemia. He was 85 years old and he was bleeding out because he had a problem with his bladder. And he asked me if I thought he should get a blood transfusion, and his hemoglobin, he was like near death. And I was like, Mike, yes, you should get a blood transfusion because you're going to die without it. And even if you get spiked blood, you have a chance of living a little bit longer. So in his case, it was worth giving, and he did get it, and he lived for another year and a half. So it's a risk-benefit situation. So you always want to hold off as long as possible. And if you do need to get a transfusion, you want a little bit of blood. Like I know someone who recently just had a problem with uterine fibroids and was bleeding massively down to a very low hemoglobin, and they just pumped blood into her. And my preference always, even when I was in conventional medicine, was to just give 1 unit of blood, then watch. Let's see what happens. Sometimes you don't have time to do that, but always give as little as possible, monitor, see what you can get away with, and only give it in very desperate situations, because we are dealing with a more tainted blood supply than we were in the past, because there's always been a tainted blood supply. It's never a risk-free. That's why you sign a consent form before you get a transfusion.
All right, well, before we go, we have to talk about we don't know what Bobby's going to say, so we're not going to try and talk about that. But the big question is, this Tylenol's coming in. People are freaking out. I got so many phone calls as soon as, the Washington Post or whatever it was put out that the new cause of autism is Tylenol, which is ridiculous, everybody. I'm sure it doesn't help, but there's plenty of kids that were vaccinated and did not get Tylenol that have autism. What causes autism, Dr. Suzanne?
Well, any of those places in the brain when it's developing that during that sequential little domino thing that I described earlier, that's your problem there. The setup can happen anywhere from fetal time, when a mother, there was a guy named Paul Patterson who wrote a book, and I cite this book in my talks, who basically said anything that causes inflammation in the mother can lead to, depending on what trimester, can lead to autism if it's an early trimester, and can lead to schizophrenia if it's a late trimester. They've proven this in humans and laboratory animals since World War times, even the psychological stress. That's why the Patagonian giants used to isolate their women and only allow them to think good thoughts. Any trauma that was happening, the rest of the tribe stayed out there. The mother was isolated and kept as calm and happy as possible every way, good nutrition. So this whole thing about Tylenol, look, it may be one of the factors, but like you said, it's only one of the factors. There's no one screaming from the rooftops louder than me about Tylenol being used in febrile illnesses. But the question always is, why are people using Tylenol all the time? I don't understand why it's being used as often as it's being used. Yeah, a one-off, probably okay. You're giving it along with the vaccine. I believe I've quoted the Schultz study that shows that there is a correlation if you do Tylenol and vaccines together, that it can definitely add to the problem of the neurologic effects, the immunologic effects. And the neurology and immunology are intimately linked. So Tylenol, look, fever is actually one of the things that keeps your mitochondria functioning properly. It's tossing protons off in one direction, it's tossing electrons off in the other direction. The intermitochondrial membrane is the key to life, okay? And fevers are one of the things that's trying to straighten that out. And Tylenol is one of the things that can screw it up. In addition to what it does to the liver, when your liver is there to detoxify, to deal with the endotoxin that's coming out of viruses or bacteria. And here you are going to shut off the glutathione production. So if you're going to give Tylenol, you damn well better be giving some glutathione along with it. At least you can deal with that aspect. In fact, my opinion is that Tylenol should be marketed with glutathione. It wouldn't make it any less active, because there are times when people need some, like, look, mastitis is no picnic, okay? If you've ever known a woman that had mastitis, I'm the biggest pain wimp on the planet, okay? So if I have mastitis, I'm going to take a dose of Tylenol. But you want to maybe breastfeed around that, find out what the half-life is, pump on your other side beforehand if you can. There are ways to limit everything, and that's what we're after. I'm not saying throw all the drugs out, although I did raise 2 children with no fever reducers in the house, not one, and that was back when I was a dumb doctor, because even then I knew that treating fevers was a really bad idea. So there's my spiel.
No, it's good. And we're out of time. But just let's end this on some message of good. What keeps you going, Dr. Suzanne? What's the biggest thing that makes you, because you don't have to sit there and speak out. You could just chill out in your garden and just forget the world. You've written books, you've done videos. There's enough there to educate. But what keeps you going and sitting here right now and doing this show for me?
Other people, really. It's other people. There's no part of me that wants to do this. I keep trying to retire out of the vaccine space. I keep trying to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to have a life. I want to learn about real biology. I want to learn how to really help people with real diseases that need help. And I'm constantly trying to I invest a lot into my own education every single year. And I keep thinking I'm going to be able to use it in the office. And then, I get a call from Joe Rogan at the time when I'm like, done. I'm totally done. And there was not a part of me that wanted to go on that show. And I made very high bar demands to go on it, thinking they would say no. And they said yes. And I had 3 friends that said, Suzanne, you need to do it. You need to get the word out to people that don't know. And they're Christian friends of mine. I'm Christian. I'm here to serve humanity. I just didn't think that this was how I would serve it. I just didn't think that this is this is why I went to medical school, and this is what I should be doing. It's unpleasant. I don't like the backlash that happens. I don't like the feeling of always feeling threatened. And I've had to rise above all that, as you know, through the years, Polly, when the death threats came in 2018. That could have easily made me want to just go live in a cave somewhere, but I had to, literally meet my demons and wink at them and say, I'm moving on here and you're not going to stop me. So I do it for humanity. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm not doing it to be necessarily a better doctor, because it's not what I do in the office. This is just what I do public. It's more of a hobby. It's an unpleasant hobby. And I do hope that it is used by people enough to counter the negativity that happens as a result of me doing it.
And remind everyone where people can follow you.
Well, I'm on X at DRSUZANNE7, and you can, on my website's currently being upgraded, but the dissolvingillusions.com website is really nice right now.
Well, Dr. Suzanne Humphries, we're so honored to have you on this morning. We do hope you'll come back. There's a lot of your questions we did not get to answer, but I'm sure we'll get you back on again, hopefully soon.
Sure, let's do that. Maybe next week we can do another one. Who knows?
Well, yes, that'd be great. Everyone would love that. Okay. And tomorrow, everybody, Michael Caine will be with you in the morning. Thank you, Dr. Suzanne. Thank you, Lou. And thank you, viewers.
Bye.
Okay, we are live.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Tell us your name, please.
My name's Emily.
Emily, and you're a nurse practitioner.
Family nurse practitioner. Yes.
All right, tell us the things that you've seen and the things you want to tell the world about. And thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you guys so much for what you do. Thank you for hearing voices, hearing families and lives. Throughout COVID, a few colleagues and my husband asked a lot of questions, especially about the shots. And I can just tell you, into COVID and the shots specifically, a few patient stories that stick out so much are just how lives have been changed. These lives have not been lost, but specifically one woman who's actually had 4 shots because she kept being recommended to continue to have booster shots and get vaccinated to prevent COVID, but she kept getting COVID. And she had such severe neurological issues. They thought she had stroke after stroke after stroke, but nothing would show up. And so then she was just being told she had psychological diagnoses of all the symptoms. And she's her life's been flipped upside down. She was working mother, and she's had to completely change her life around, career, out of work for a couple years related to just the injuries that she's suffered, different medications, and again being passed around different specialties and providers because she just was told, like, oh, it's all in your head, like it's all in your head, there's no way these shots have done anything to you. So just trying to help protocols that Children's Health Defense has also helped me with as a provider, and other groups, FLCCC, who are, amazing providers trying to help patients through these vaccine injuries that have been so devastating. Another similar gentleman working, the main worker for his family, and after his 3rd shot had such horrible neurological issues, has been out of work for months and months, and again been through all the specialists, cardiologists, pulmonologists, told there's nothing wrong with you, but yet difficulty breathing and difficulty functioning mentally, and still has had COVID several times after the COVID shots. And so just being told, oh, just keep getting the shots because this will help prevent you from getting COVID. So just trying to help support patients and talking through what they've been through and validating that these shots have drastically changed their lives, and help support them getting back to a functioning state of being, fathers and husbands and working jobs to support their families. Has been really, really devastating.
Do you feel that the whole COVID era has been a massive education for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've tried to question things in the healthcare arena since becoming a nurse first, and then a provider as a nurse practitioner. Always wanted to question some of these protocols of like, why do we do certain things, this and that, even vaccines. But then when COVID has hit and just the shutdowns, and especially the push for shots and shots and shots, like, whoa, like, wait a minute, what are we doing, and where is this coming from, and how do we know it's safe, especially the safety of so many things in the healthcare arena right now.
And it's affected this beautiful child here because he's doing really well.
He's great. He's the youngest of 3. His older siblings have had vaccines, and so we became better educated on what are in these vaccines. Why do we have to have so many for our children? He was born in 2020 when everything was hitting, and we started to really ask a lot more questions about vaccines and look and see at the devastating effects of how many people are negatively affected by these vaccines, that we support their immune systems to try to fight off if he got measles or mumps or chickenpox. So just a lot of questions of why.
So we hear a lot of stories like this of people in the medical profession really waking up to the whole thing during COVID. So really it's backfired on them, everything that happened in COVID, because people like you are now questioning and not vaccinating your children.
Right.
Taking a different turn.
Yeah, right.
How do you feel about the training that you got given as a nurse, pushing the vaccinations? They didn't tell you, did they? No, and that's what's so crazy is definitely looking back at the education, both of like undergraduate in nursing and then becoming a provider, and just thinking, how were we educated on vaccines? And we never were. We were just told, this is what you do, this is what people need, this is what prevents illness and prevents death. So everybody should be vaccinated. It's public health. It's what we do. But never how they work, where, when they were made, how they're made, how they truly work in our body down to like the cellular level. What are they doing when we get all this injected, and what is exactly being injected? None of that education for sure, which has now come about, which I'm grateful, right? You take the pros out of devastation, of all the devastation with COVID. We're so grateful to be learning so much more about health in general for our children, for me, for my patients, and just trying to help learn more. Is there anything else you want to tell the people?
I would love to validate that especially the shots, if you've had the vaccines, they have caused a lot of issues, and to please reach out for help, because there is help out there, and to keep asking questions and feel empowered to question your healthcare provider, to question and ask why and ask how, because I think it's a great conversation to have for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement.
Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll of course hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.